Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Today I wanted to go over Pascal's wager and explain why I believe that it's a good argument. So to start, I want to just say that Pascal's wager is a very popular argument, but I believe that it's often mischaracterized as trying to do something that it's not trying to do. So to begin with, I want to go over the popular presentation of Pascal's wager. So the way that Pascal's wager typically works, we start with this 2x2 grid. So I'm going to draw that out quick. So this says believe and don't believe. That's the headers for the columns. And then the headers for the rows will be God or no God. And the way it goes basically is if you believe that if you believe in God and he's real, you gain eternal life. You have an infinite gain. You gain as Pascal says in his presentation of it, you gain an infinite number of lives. But if there's no God, you have little to no loss. If God's not real but you believe in him. So we'll say negative 0.01, like you lose very little. On the other hand, if you don't believe and he's real, you have infinite loss. You go to hell and suffer eternal damnation. But if there is no God and you don't believe, you gain the truth, I guess, but you don't really gain much. Like it's just sitting at the status quo. So it's not as big of a reward for correctly not believing in God as there is as if you correctly believe in God. So the argument goes, why not wager nothing or next to nothing for the chance at an infinite gain? For example, if a casino told me that I could take a bet where I just pay $1 to flip a coin where heads gets me as much money as I could ever need, so in practice infinity, to buy whatever I want, I would take that bet every single time. And it'd be even more obvious that I should take that bet if the casino told me that if I didn't take the bet, I was still participating in a wager of sorts, because if it flipped heads, I would be in infinite debt and they were going to enslave me for the rest of my life until I paid it off. And I think there's a reason this argument's popular. It has a sort of force behind it. It gives belief a certain practicality that can be convincing for a lot of people. But I don't find this particular presentation of Pascal's wager to be the most convincing argument for God. And to kind of explain why, I want to go over my reasons for it. So first, I think to many people, to many atheists, to many skeptics, the existence of God is not a coin flip, as Pascal kind of presents it in his argument. There isn't an equal chance that God exists or doesn't exist in these people's minds. In fact, to some atheists, the probability that God exists is a 0% chance. They just say God doesn't exist. So for them, there's no reason to stake anything, even to take that slight loss. Like imagine if you knew that the coin had tails on both sides. Like why would I pay $1 to see if it flips heads? I'd just be losing $1. So there's no reason to stake anything at all on the potential existence of God. Second, Pascal's wager doesn't provide any tangible evidence or any evidence at all, even like an argument, for the existence of God. If someone had no reason to believe in God before, they definitely don't have any reason to believe now that they've heard Pascal's wager. To them, the existence of a God is still an arbitrary assertion, and they're not going to be able to believe even if they wanted to. And they probably shouldn't believe even if they wanted to, because it's still arbitrary to them. It's still an arbitrary belief. And why wager for an arbitrary belief? Additionally, the third point, and I think this one's less interesting, but I'll cover it a little bit at the end. It doesn't establish the existence of the Christian God. In Pascal's context, he was discussing Christianity because that was the overwhelming dominant force at the time. Now we're in a more globalized world. There's more religions that people who are hearing this argument have the option to choose from. But yeah, I think with so many religions in the world, and all of them have their own afterlife claims. And in some cases, like belief in Christianity would send you to the Islamic hell. So belief in the Christian God would still lead to eternal damnation in certain contexts. And based on the logic of this presentation of the wager, you should still choose. You should ultimately choose the religion that has the greatest reward and the worst potential punishment. Now, I think that this argument doesn't necessarily escape Pascal's wager, because even in this context, you should choose something to at least avoid eternal damnation in all possible contexts. But that is an argument that people often present as well, and I do think it's a compelling argument. But I think that these three responses are typical responses that atheists will give in response to Pascal's wager. But you don't have to just take my word for it. Let's listen right now to an atheist responding to this argument.
So Pascal's wager is basically the idea that if you believe in God, he's either real or not real. And if he's real, you go to heaven, which is a great thing. But if he's not real, well, then you just die. And then nothing really happens after that. And if you don't believe in God and he's real, you go to hell. But if he's not real, it's basically the same thing than if you do believe, you just die and it's done. So they basically use this argument to say that, oh, just believe in God, just be safe with this, take the safe bet, regardless of the fact that there's many different gods that you could believe in, and all of these different gods, or most of them, say that if you believe in a different God, then you're going straight to hell. But regardless of that, that's their basic argument for believing in a God in general. And this sets up a terrible epistemological standard, because it basically tells you to accept the arbitrary for absolutely no reason other than the potential consequences of accepting the arbitrary. And it basically gives the existence of a God the same weight as the non-existence of a God. The issue is the existence of a God is impossible. God does not exist. There's no such thing as the supernatural. I've gone into this in other videos, but if you want to look into more of this, it's not that hard to figure out. As long as you're not being evasive and you're being honest, it's really, really easy to realize that God doesn't exist if you're being honest with yourself. But
Okay, so sorry to make you guys listen to that guy there. I don't know what he was yapping about, but we're done with that now. No, that was me from 4 years ago doing a video on this exact topic. And you can see in that video, I make those 3 points at some point in the video. Like right away, I kind of talk about it not establishing the existence of the Christian God. I go into how it's an arbitrary claim, or how it's like not actually providing evidence. It's just telling you to accept an arbitrary claim. And then I also, at the very end, go into how obvious it is that there is no God. And obviously, I changed my opinion on that quite a bit. But yeah, that you can watch my Why I'm a Christian video for that. So I guess now that we've kind of established and explained the popular presentation and the rebuttals to Pascal's wager, I want to offer my view that includes some of the characterizations of, or some clarifications of, the intent of this argument and how Pascal presented it. Because I ultimately believe, as I said at the beginning of the video and in the title of this video, that Pascal's wager is a good argument in the context that it's presented. Specifically, I think the wager is a good argument for fence sitters, or for unconvinced people, or for people that are skeptical, that haven't fully written off the idea that God could exist and have some interest and think, maybe it's possible. And I think it's a good argument for these fence sitters to become Christians, but it's not great as a standalone argument. And I don't think it was necessarily presented that way either. If you believe that there's a 0% chance that Christianity is true, this argument doesn't apply to you. It wouldn't have applied to me 4 years ago. If you believe that there's a 0% chance, you can't be convinced. The conversation's done. And this wager is essentially meaningless to you. Now, Pascal lays this out as kind of a basic assumption, this idea that it's not a 0% chance of God existing, when he says, and I'm going to quote Pascal a few times throughout this video, when he says, "Let us say, either God is or he is not. But to which view shall we be inclined? Reason cannot decide this question. Infinite chaos separates us. At the far end of this distance, a coin is being spun, which will come down to heads or tails. How will you wager? Reason cannot make you choose either. Reason cannot prove either wrong. Now, I think this belief that reason cannot prove or disprove God is kind of intended to be the shared starting point of the wager. If you disagree with that point, then this wager doesn't apply to you. This wager is we're not starting from the same assumptions, so the argument obviously is going to be unconvincing to you. So this belief, it's kind of intended as a shared starting point. If you disagree, you'll remain unconvinced and will likely remain that way until your closed-mindedness subsides. And I spend a lot of time in my Why I'm a Christian video discussing like what reason can know, what sort of assumptions reason has behind it, whether reason can, once we have certain assumptions about reason, whether it can make claims about the supernatural. I discuss a lot of that in the Why I'm a Christian video, so I'm not going to rehash a bunch of that there, but I think that's important as a starting point when just thinking about this argument. And I think as a result, this argument focuses on convincing the uncertain, who also agree that they can't come to a conclusion about this matter through human reason alone. So if you're like an agnostic or a skeptic, this argument's more intended at you, who don't believe that you can fully disprove the idea of God. You're just undecided. You lack a belief right now. So next, I think we should consider the point. I think now that we've kind of gone through point one, we should consider the point that Pascal's wager does not provide any evidence for God. God is still arbitrary after this wager. We can't force arbitrary belief. So even if we are convinced to make the wager, we still can't believe without more evidence. However, I don't think Pascal's wager is intended to be a standalone argument. I don't think it's intended to convince and provide evidence and reason on its own. Instead, I think it's offering encouragement to the skeptic or uncertain person to begin investigating further with a framework that's significantly more open to belief than the skeptic currently holds. And Pascal argues for the uncertain and unconvinced. In his book Pensies, he argues for the uncertain and unconvinced to immerse themselves in Christianity and Christian literature and all of what Christianity is to find convincing. And he says, you want to be cured of unbelief and asked for remedy. Learn from those who were once bound like you and who now wager all they have. These are people who know the road you wish to follow, who have been cured of the affliction of which you wish to be cured. Follow the way by which they began. They behave just as if they did believe, taking holy water, having masses said, and so on. That will make you believe quite naturally. And I go to like a framework analysis here, like sort of what Pascal's pointing at, like immersing yourself in Christianity is trying to investigate further and approach it with a framework more open to belief. I go into a framework analysis a lot more in depth than my historical evidence of Jesus video. And I go into like sensitivity and specificity and all these statistical concepts. I don't know how necessary it was to do as much of that in-depth dive into statistics. I think it's interesting, but I want to try to explain it a little bit more concisely here. So yeah, let's explain it. Let's look again at our belief matrix from before. As we heard from the quote, Pascal advocates for a framework that's so radically open, i.e. going to masses, taking holy water, and so on and so on. I think I'm sure like reading the Bible, reading theology, those type of things would be included in that and so on part. As we heard from the quote, Pascal, he advocates for a framework that's so radically open that it actually sounds like you're actively trying to convince yourself that Christianity is true. And it sounds quite biased upon first hearing it. However, I think that this is actually a significantly more appropriate framework that we should adopt when approaching these questions than a sort of court of law sort of framework that skeptics like Matt Dillahunty will advocate for. that it simply assumes that God is false until proven true, in the same sense that a court assumes guilt is false until proven true, or i.e. innocent until proven guilty. So I think a lot of people approach the question of God with that mindset, a very skeptical mindset, a very skeptical, like, we want to believe that God is false until he's proven true. Similar to a court of law. And this makes sense because we trust the courts. Courts are rational, right? Now, the reason for innocent until proven guilty, the reason that we hold that framework is because of the consequences of incorrect belief. We believe that convicting an innocent person is much worse than letting a guilty person free. So we require high standards for proof of guilt. So we have this bias of innocent until proven guilty, because we want to bias the court towards innocence. We want to bias the court to not believing that people are guilty. And even if that means a few guilty people go free, we believe that there's a much larger social gain from the idea that innocent people are not being convicted. So we make that trade-off. However, I think that these consequences don't apply in our decision to believe in God. And I think that's what Pascal's wager points out extremely well, extremely clearly with this framework. In our case, falsely believing in God, right here, or convicting God of existing when he's innocent, if we want to use court language, is infinitely better than falsely disbelieving in God, or letting God go when we believe he's guilty, or when he's actually guilty of existing, if we want to keep using the court language. So this case right here, this type of error, not believing when God exists, is infinitely worse than believing when no God exists. And because of that, we should have a bias in our framework, or it's a more appropriate framework to approach belief in God with the mentality of real until proven fake. It's better to make that approach than with a fake until proven real. In this case, we want to have an approach of in the court idea of guilty until proven innocent. And I think by taking this approach, Pascal explains, what do you have to lose? It's true that you won't enjoy noxious pleasures, glory, and good living, but will you not have others? And as just a quick tangent, I think this quote also addresses this criticism, like you have this negative 0.01 here, this idea that you do lose something, you do stake something on God's existence. I think the quote from Pascal there, where it talks about, will you not have others? I think that quote addresses kind of the criticism that you lose certain pleasures of life by becoming Christian. So you don't quite lose nothing, like Pascal says. But I think that criticism of the wager is incredibly short-sighted, as it completely ignores all the things that you replace these pleasures of not believing in God with, or this freedom of not believing in God with. It completely ignores all the joy, community, meaning that you gain from Christianity that, in my opinion, more than makes up for any losses that you might have by not having your Sunday mornings free anymore. But I want to close this section of the video basically by saying that Pascal's wager, its primary goal is not to provide undeniable proof of God. It's not to make God non-arbitrary. It's not to be a sole argument alone for you to become convinced of God. It should be paired with other apologetics, other theological discussions, the historical evidence of Jesus, all these different things. But instead, it's to encourage the uncertain and skeptical to reevaluate their framework, sort of what we're talking about here. It's to encourage the uncertain and skeptical to reevaluate their framework and to immerse themselves in Christianity, to immerse themselves in Christian literature, maybe go to church, maybe read some theology, read the Bible, like all these sort of things. And I think in that proper context, it's a very good argument. It's very difficult to overcome that argument. But with all of that, I think now I still haven't I did address it briefly at the beginning, but I haven't fully addressed the argument for that this particular wager doesn't address other religions. I think this wager could convince you of other religions if you find them to be the most initially convincing to you. But I think that the argument is, like, for the reasons I mentioned before, as well as other reasons here, I think this argument is less interesting because just expanding my argument here, the Pascal's wager exists in this Christian context where it applies specifically to those on the fence about Christianity. It could apply to those like on the fence about Islam. It could apply to those on the fence about Judaism. If those are something that compels you, I mean, go ahead and jump into those religions. By the logic of the wager, though, you should choose at least one. But I think in the absence of some reason to choose Christianity in particular, the argument kind of falls flat in the context of me using it as a Christian apologetic method. Because I do believe ultimately you should choose Christianity. I think Christianity is the right one to choose. And there's other arguments to supplement that with. But I think what makes Christianity so unique is its bold and well-documented historical claims. Unlike other religions, Christianity makes an evidentiary claim that we could investigate and falsify. It's based on a historical figure, Jesus, that is claimed to be God, that resurrected, all of this stuff. And of all the religions and supernatural claims, its central claim, this historical central claim of crucifixion and resurrection, is arguably one of the most credible and well-documented of all other religions. And you can do your own research on that. You can come to disagree with me. This is why I choose Christianity, and I think it should be convincing for you as well if you do the research. I think that this evidence should encourage further research and interest. And the incredible news that the gospel offers, along with all this documentation, should be enough to take this religious claim seriously, and feel inspired and excited to investigate further. I know for me, the intellectual passion and curiosity that Christianity inspires me to is so life-giving, so motivating, and I mean, it got me to start posting on this channel again, which I was likely to just leave dead for years and years to come. And I know that you can feel that same way, can have that passion sparked in you, can have that new curiosity, can have that want to dig deeper and to want to understand all of this more. So I think if you feel so compelled by this video, I encourage you to dive deeper. Maybe go find a church near you, go try it out, go to one mass, or maybe open your Bible, go buy a Bible, and look at it, or just go to Barnes & Noble and read through some things, or go online. There's Bible apps, there's all this stuff. And then start watching theological content, start watching apologetics content favoring Christianity. If you have some belief that you think completely disproves Christianity, go watch the Christian response to that, because they're out there. They're out there for so many things. I haven't made a video response to everything, but maybe someday I will. But yeah, I encourage you to dive deeper, and if your journey is anything like mine, I can assure you that what you find on the other side is life-affirming, life-giving, beyond words. But with all of that in mind, I open the floor to the comment section. I'm sure there's a lot of things people have to say. If you like the video, though, please like. And if you want to be notified of new uploads every week, please subscribe. And if you feel so inclined, please support me on Patreon. I don't demand this of you. I have a good job as it is. But yeah, it would be nice to have a little bit more funding for this. I could hire editors or stuff like that. I don't know. I don't even know what I would necessarily do, but it would be nice if you appreciate the content. And the link to that is in the description. And then also, please join my Discord server. It's still pretty dead, but I do want to resurrect it. So the link to that is in the description as well. But with all of that, shorter video, thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next video. Peace.